The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse like bullets against armor. Relentless, cold, unforgiving. Manhattan stretched below, a galaxy of lights bleeding through the storm, each pinprick representing a life Dominic Russo had long stopped caring about. 42 floors above the chaos of the city, he existed in a different world, one built on fear, blood, and absolute control. Dominic stepped through the private elevator doors at exactly 2:47 a.m., his Italian leather shoes silent against the black marble floor. The penthouse was dark except for the ambient glow of the city filtering through the rain-streaked windows. He preferred it this way. Darkness suited him, concealed the parts of himself he'd buried so deep that sometimes even he forgot they existed. His reflection caught in the glass as he walked through the expansive living room. 6'2" of controlled violence wrapped in a tailored Tom Ford suit now disheveled and stained. Blood, not his own, speckled across his white shirt cuffs. His knuckles were split and raw, the price of making a point to a lieutenant who'd forgotten his place in the hierarchy. At 28, Dominic Russo commanded an empire that stretched from Brooklyn to the docks of New Jersey, built on his father's legacy and cemented by his own ruthless efficiency. He was exhausted, not physically, but in a way that sleep never quite fixed, the kind of exhaustion that settled into bones and made a man wonder, in rare unguarded moments, if this was all there was. Power, fear, the endless chess game of staying alive while others plotted your downfall. Dominic loosened his tie as he walked down the hallway toward his bedroom, the one sanctuary in this fortress of steel and glass. His bedroom was strictly off-limits. Not even his housekeeper of 15 years entered without explicit permission. It was the only place where he could lower his guard, where Dominic Russo the man could exist separately from Dominic Russo the boss. He pushed open the heavy door and reached for the light switch, then froze. Someone was in his bed. Every muscle in his body went rigid. His hand moved instinctively to the Glock tucked against his spine, fingers wrapping around the grip with practiced ease. Years of survival instinct kicked in. Assess, identify, eliminate. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, sharpened by adrenaline, and he could make out a small figure curled beneath his charcoal gray sheets. Dominic's jaw clenched. A setup. Had to be. Someone had gotten past his security, breached his inner sanctum, and was either supremely arrogant or supremely stupid. He approached slowly, gun drawn, each step calculated and silent. The figure didn't move. He could hear soft, even breathing. Sleep, not unconsciousness. That ruled out an overdose or a planted body meant to frame him. As he drew closer, his finger on the trigger, something caught his eye on the nightstand. A worn paperback book, its spine cracked and pages dog-eared. Next to it, a pair of practical black shoes, not expensive, placed neatly side by side. His gaze traveled back to the bed, and in the dim light filtering through the windows, he finally saw her face. Elena Martinez, his newest maid. The recognition should have brought relief, but instead it ignited a different kind of fury. Dominic holstered his weapon and reached out, snapping on the bedside lamp. Light flooded the space, and the girl, woman he corrected, though she looked impossibly young in sleep, stirred. Elena's eyes fluttered open, confused at first, adjusting to the sudden brightness. Then she saw him standing over her, and understanding crashed through her like cold water. Her brown eyes went wide with terror, and she scrambled backward so fast she nearly fell off the opposite side of the bed. "Mr. Russo, Oh God." Her voice cracked, thick with sleep and panic. She clutched the sheets to her chest even though she was fully clothed in her black and white maid's uniform. "I can explain. You're in my bed." His voice was ice, controlled, dangerous, the voice that preceded violence. He didn't raise it. He never needed to. "Do you have any idea what happens to people who enter my private space without permission?" Elena's face had gone pale, her olive skin ashen in the lamplight. She pushed herself up, her hands trembling as she tried to smooth down her uniform. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a neat bun, had come partially loose, strands falling around her face. She looked so small in his king-sized bed, so utterly out of place in his world of luxury and danger. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Russo. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to." She was speaking too fast, words tumbling over each other. She took a breath, visibly trying to compose herself despite the fear radiating from her. "The heating system broke in the servants' quarters. It's been freezing for the past 3 hours. I came up to check your thermostat because Mrs. Chen said the controls for the whole floor are in your suite." Dominic said nothing, just watched her with those cold, calculating eyes that had made grown men confess to crimes they didn't commit. Elena continued, her voice steadier now, though her hand still shook. I fixed the issue, it was just a programming error. But I felt dizzy, so I sat down on your bed for just a moment. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I've been working double shifts because Rosa called in sick and I just... She stopped herself, seeming to realize that excuses wouldn't save her. There's no excuse. It was inappropriate and disrespectful. I'll pack my things immediately. She moved to stand, and that's when Dominic noticed details he'd missed in his initial assessment. Her uniform was wrinkled, not from sleep but from wear, the fabric thin in places from too many washings. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, the kind that came from exhaustion that went beyond a few missed hours of sleep. Her hands, now gripping the edge of the bed as she prepared to leave, were red and raw, the hands of someone who worked with harsh chemicals and scalding water. He also noticed what she was holding when he'd turned on the light. A book. He glanced at it again on the nightstand. East of Eden, by Steinbeck. Not the kind of thing he'd expect from a maid, though he immediately chided himself for the assumption. His mother had been a maid once before his father had noticed her, before the Russo Empire had consumed them all. How old are you? The question came out before he'd consciously decided to ask it. Elena looked confused by the question, thrown off by the shift. 23, sir. How long have you worked here? 6 weeks, Mr. Russo. She was still standing, ready to flee, but his question seemed to have temporarily frozen her in place. And in 6 weeks, has anyone told you the rules about my bedroom? Yes, sir. Mrs. Chen was very clear. No one enters without explicit permission. Ever. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I violated your trust. I understand if you need to let me go. There was something in the way she said it. Let me go. Not fire me. A euphemism, maybe. Or just politeness. But in his world, let me go could mean something far more permanent. He wondered if she understood that, if she knew who he really was beyond the businessman facade. Dominic walked to the window, putting distance between them, giving himself time to think. The rain continued its assault on the glass, and below, New York lived and breathed, indifferent to the small drama playing out in this expensive cage in the sky. He should fire her, at minimum. His reputation depended on absolute boundaries, absolute control. Word would spread if he showed weakness, if he let this breach slide. But something stopped him, something about her quiet dignity, the way she hadn't begged or cried or tried to use her femininity as a shield. She'd simply stated facts and accepted consequences. Your mother, he said, still looking out at the city. She's sick. In Los Angeles. He heard her sharp intake of breath. How do you know that? I know everything about the people who work in my home. It was partially true. He had files on everyone, but he'd actually overheard Elena on the phone last week, her voice tight with worry as she spoke to someone about medical bills and treatment options. He'd filed the information away, as he did with everything, never knowing when knowledge might become leverage. She has lupus, Elena said quietly. The medical bills are significant. That's why I'm here instead of Los Angeles. New York pays better, and I can send more money home to help my sister care for her. Dominic turned back to face her. She was still standing beside his bed, looking like she might bolt at any second, but there was something else in her expression now, not just fear, but a kind of fierce protectiveness when she spoke about her family. The servants' quarters should be fixed by morning, he said. You'll sleep here tonight. Elena's eyes widened. Mr. Russo, I can't. You can, and you will. His tone left no room for argument. It's freezing in your room, you're exhausted, and I don't need my staff collapsing from hypothermia. I'll take one of the guest rooms. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Elena? Yes, sir? This doesn't happen again. Next time someone enters my private space without permission, I won't be so understanding, are we clear? Crystal clear, Mr. Russo. Thank you. He nodded once and left, closing the door behind him. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands were shaking slightly, not from anger, but from something else entirely. Something he didn't want to name. Inside the bedroom, Elna stood frozen for a full minute after he'd left, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She'd been certain, absolutely certain, that this was the end, that she'd be fired at best or worse, that the rumors she'd heard whispered about Mr. Russo's other business were true, and her body would wash up in the East River as a message to others who dared cross him. But instead he'd shown mercy? No. Not mercy exactly. Something more complicated. something that made the fear in her chest twist into a different kind of confusion. Elena looked around the bedroom properly for the first time. It was massive but surprisingly impersonal. Expensive furniture, neutral colors, nothing that revealed anything about the man who slept here. No photos, no personal items except for a watch on the dresser, and a stack of business newspapers on a chair. It was more like a luxury hotel room than someone's private sanctuary. She moved to gather her book and shoes, then hesitated. He'd told her to sleep here. She looked at the bed, still rumpled from where she'd been curled up, and felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She'd fallen asleep in her boss's bed, her impossibly attractive, terrifying, dangerous boss's bed. Elena had been careful not to think too much about Dominic Russo since she'd started working here. It was safer that way. She'd noticed, of course. She'd have to be blind not to. The sharp angles of his face, the way his dark eyes could pin you in place with a single glance, the controlled power in how he moved through spaces like he owned not just the penthouse but the entire world. But she'd trained herself to see past it, to treat him like any other employer, to stay invisible and unremarkable. Invisibility was survival in her world. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she'd learned early that being noticed often meant being targeted. Work hard, keep your head down, don't make waves. That had been her mother's advice, and it had served Elena well. Until tonight, when exhaustion had betrayed her and thrust her directly into the line of sight of the most dangerous man she'd ever met. She changed out of her uniform. She kept a spare in the supply closet on this floor, and washed her face in his bathroom, which was all black marble and gold fixtures, a room larger than her entire apartment. When she caught her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her eyes looked huge, still wide with adrenaline, and her hair was a mess. She looked young, vulnerable, everything she tried not to be. Elena climbed back into the bed, staying on the very edge as if that somehow made it less inappropriate. The sheets smelled like expensive detergent and something else. Something masculine and subtle that must be him. She pulled the covers up and stared at the ceiling, knowing sleep would be impossible now. But exhaustion had other plans. Within minutes, her eyes grew heavy, and she drifted off into a dreamless sleep, unaware that 42 floors below, in the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan, her presence in Dominic Russo's bed was already setting wheels in motion that neither of them could control. In a guest room down the hall, Dominic stood at another window watching the same storm, unable to shake the image of Elena curled up in his bed. She'd looked so peaceful before he'd woken her, so innocent, a word he hadn't applied to anyone in his world for longer than he could remember. He'd lied when he said he'd take a guest room. Instead, he poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and sat in his study, reviewing security footage from earlier in the evening. His meeting had gone poorly. The Castellano family was pushing into territory he'd claimed, and compromises would need to be made or blood would need to be spilled. Probably both. This was his life. Constant vigilance, constant calculation, trust measured in inches and loyalty bought with fear or money or both. There was no room for softness, no space for anything that couldn't be controlled or weaponized. And yet he couldn't stop thinking about the worn book on his nightstand, about raw hands and tired eyes, about a woman who'd apologize for falling asleep instead of begging for her life. Dominic drained his glass and poured another. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in his penthouse a woman who didn't belong in his world slept in his bed. By morning, everything would return to normal. Boundaries would be re-established, order restored. But as he sat alone in the darkness, Dominic Russo couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted, something that couldn't be put back the way it was, no matter how much control he thought he had. And in his world, where control meant survival, that was the most dangerous feeling of all. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and, for a disorienting moment, had no idea where she was. The sheets beneath her were too soft, the mattress too comfortable and the ceiling too high. Then memory crashed through her like a freight train, and she bolted upright, her heart hammering. Mr. Russo's bed. She'd slept in Mr. Russo's bed. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand. 7:23 a.m. She was late. The staff meeting started at 7, and Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, had zero tolerance for tardiness. Elena threw off the covers and rushed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, trying to erase the evidence of sleep from her features. Her uniform from last night was wrinkled beyond repair, so she'd have to risk going down to the servants' quarters to change. She made the bed with practiced efficiency, erasing any trace of her presence, then grabbed her shoes and book. As she opened the bedroom door, she nearly collided with Mrs. Chen herself. The older woman stood in the hallway, her steel gray hair pulled into its usual severe bun, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Chen had worked for the Russo family for 15 years. She'd seen 3 different bosses and survived them all through discretion and an almost supernatural ability to anticipate needs before they were voiced. "Miss Martinez," Mrs. Chen said, her tone neutral. "Mr. Russo requested that you bring his breakfast to his study at 8 o'clock sharp. He takes his coffee black, 2 eggs over easy wheat toast, and the Wall Street Journal. Do not be late." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Mrs. Chen, I can explain about last night." The older woman held up a hand. "Mr. Russo has already explained. The heating issue has been resolved. We don't speak of this again." But there was something in Mrs. Chen's eyes. Not quite warmth, but perhaps the closest thing to it Elena had ever seen from her. "Get changed. You have 30 minutes. Elena nodded and hurried past, feeling the weight of Mrs. Chen's gaze on her back. As she descended the service stairs to the lower level where the staff quarters were located, she could hear whispers cutting off as she passed other employees. Word had already spread. In a household of 12 staff members, secrets were impossible to keep. Maria, one of the other maids, caught her arm as she entered the women's changing room. "Is it true?" Maria whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "You were in his bedroom and you're still alive." "It was a misunderstanding," Elena said, pulling a fresh uniform from her locker. "The heating broke, that's all." "That's all?" Maria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Elena, no one goes into Mr. Russo's private rooms. Ever. Thomas worked here for 3 years, and he got fired for accidentally opening the wrong door. You don't understand what you've walked into." Elena wanted to say that she understood perfectly, that she'd seen the coldness in Dominic Russo's eyes last night, felt the barely contained violence radiating from him. But she also couldn't explain the strange mercy he'd shown, the way he'd let her stay instead of throwing her out into the freezing night. "I have to bring him breakfast," Elena said, changing quickly. "I can't be late." Maria shook her head. "Be careful, chica. Men like him, they don't show kindness without expecting something in return." The words followed Elena as she made her way to the kitchen, where Chef Laurent was already preparing Mr. Russo's breakfast with the precision of a surgeon. The French chef had been with the household for 8 years and ran his kitchen like a military operation. "You're the one taking the tray up?" Laurent asked, his thick accent making the question sound almost musical. He studied her with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Interesting, he usually has Mrs. Chen bring it or he eats in the dining room." "He requested me specifically," Elena said, hating how defensive she sounded. Laurent handed her the tray, prepared exactly to specification, everything arranged with artistic precision on bone china. "Then don't keep him waiting. And Elena, whatever is happening here, be smart. Mr. Russo is not a man who does anything without purpose." At exactly 8 o'clock, Elena knocked on the study door, her hands steady despite the nervousness coiling in her stomach. "Enter." She pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped into a room she'd only glimpsed during cleaning rotations. The study was pure masculinity. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with everything from classic literature to legal texts to what looked like first editions of political philosophy. A massive desk dominated one end of the room, and behind it sat Dominic Russo. He'd changed since last night, now wearing charcoal slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. His dark hair was still damp from a shower, and he looked every inch the dangerous man the staff whispered about, despite the civilized setting. "Put it on the desk," he said without looking up from the tablet he was studying. Elena crossed the room, hyper-aware of every sound her shoes made on the hardwood floor. She set the tray down carefully, arranging everything just so, and stepped back. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Russo?" "Sit." The command was so unexpected that Elena almost asked him to repeat it. "Sir?" "Sit down, Elena." He gestured to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "We need to talk." Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to move to the chair and sit on its edge, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Dominic finally looked up from his tablet, and those dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her feel transparent, like he could see every thought, every fear, every secret she'd ever kept. "You're afraid of me," he observed. It wasn't a question. "I'd be stupid not to be," Elena answered before she could stop herself. Then she winced internally, expecting anger. Instead, something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Honest. I appreciate that. He leaned back in his chair, coffee cup in hand. Tell me about yourself, Elena Martinez. Beyond what's in your employment file. I don't understand. It's not complicated. Where are you from? What did you do before you came to New York? What do you want from life? He took a sip of his coffee, waiting. Elena felt like she was navigating a minefield blindfolded. I'm from East Los Angeles. I worked as a housekeeper at a hotel there for 4 years. I came to New York 6 months ago because the pay is better, and I could send more money home to help with my mother's medical expenses. She paused, then added quietly, What I want is for my mother to get better. That's all. That's all, Dominic repeated, and something in his tone made it sound both simple and impossibly complex. No grand ambitions? No dreams of something more? Dreams are expensive, Mr. Russo. I deal in necessities. He studied her for a long moment, and Elena fought the urge to look away. There was something predatory in his gaze, but also something else. Curiosity, maybe, or calculation. She couldn't read him the way she could read most people. I have a problem, Dominic said finally, setting down his coffee. I need someone to deliver a package for me this afternoon. Someone invisible. Someone no one would suspect of working for me. Elena's blood ran cold. This was it. The payment he expected for his mercy last night. Mr. Russo, I'm not sure I'm qualified. You're exactly qualified, he interrupted. You're a young woman, a maid, completely unremarkable to anyone watching my movements. You'll take the subway to Brooklyn, walk into a restaurant called Il Gabbiano, order a cappuccino, and leave the package on the table when you go. That's all. That's all, Elena echoed, hearing the weight behind those simple words. And if I refuse? Dominic's expression didn't change. You won't refuse. It wasn't a threat, exactly. More like a statement of fact, as if he could see the decision she'd make before she made it herself. And he was right. She needed this job. Her mother's treatment cost $3,000 a month, and her sister Carmen's salary as a teacher's aide barely covered rent and food. Elena's paychecks from the penthouse were the only thing keeping them afloat. What's in the package? She asked. Nothing that concerns you. But Elena, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, which somehow made it more threatening. If you open it, if you look inside, if you tell anyone about this conversation, you'll disappear. Not fired, not deported. Disappeared. Do you understand the distinction? Elena's mouth had gone dry. She understood perfectly. She'd understood since her first day here, when she'd seen the way powerful men entered this penthouse. Politicians, judges, businessmen who appeared on the news. She'd understood when she noticed the way security checked every delivery, every visitor, with the thoroughness of people expecting violence. Dominic Russo wasn't just wealthy. He was dangerous. I understand, she whispered. Good. He pulled a manila envelope from his desk drawer and slid it across to her. The restaurant is on Court Street. Be there at 2 o'clock exactly. Order your cappuccino, sit at a table by the window and leave the package when you go. Take your time, act natural. Someone will retrieve it after you leave. Elena took the envelope with trembling hands. It was thin, lightweight, papers maybe, or photographs. Nothing that felt like drugs or weapons, but that didn't make her feel any better. And then you come back here, you continue your work, and we never speak of this again. Dominic stood, signaling the end of their conversation. Unless I need you for something similar in the future. It wasn't a question. Elena stood as well, clutching the envelope to her chest. Mr. Russo, why me? You must have people who do this kind of thing professionally. For the first time, something genuine crossed his face. Not quite a smile, but close. Because you're afraid of me, but you're sitting in that chair anyway. Because you didn't beg for your job or offer me anything in exchange for keeping it. Because when you thought I might kill you last night, you didn't scream or cry. You apologized for disrespecting my space. He walked around the desk, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You have courage, Elena Martinez. And in my world, that's rarer than loyalty or skill. He was so close she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle, cedar and bergamot, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the shadow of exhaustion under his eyes despite the early hour, close enough that she felt something besides fear flutter in her chest, something dangerous and entirely inappropriate. I'll do it, Elena said, hating how breathless she sounded. But after this, we're even. For last night, Dominic's lips curved into something that was almost a smile. We're even. The subway ride to Brooklyn felt endless. Elena sat with the envelope in her purse, hyper-aware of its presence, convinced everyone in the car could somehow sense what she was carrying. She'd changed out of her uniform into civilian clothes, jeans, a simple blue sweater, her winter coat, trying to blend in with the Saturday afternoon crowd of shoppers and tourists. Il Gabbiano turned out to be a small Italian restaurant tucked between a bookshop and a dry cleaner, the kind of place that looked like it had been there for generations. Elena checked her phone. 1:58 p.m. She took a deep breath, whispered a prayer her mother had taught her, and pushed open the door. The interior was warm and inviting, with red checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and fresh bread. A handful of customers sat scattered throughout, mostly older couples and families. Nothing suspicious, nothing dangerous. Elena's heartbeat began to slow. "Just one?" the hostess asked, a young woman with a bright smile. "Yes, please." By the window? The hostess led her to a small table with a view of Court Street, handed her a menu, and disappeared. Elena ordered her cappuccino from a waiter who looked barely old enough to work legally, then forced herself to sit back and look casual, like she did this every day. The cappuccino arrived quickly, the foam decorated with a perfect leaf design. Elena sipped it slowly, watching people pass by outside. A woman walking 3 dogs, a teenager on a skateboard, an old man reading a newspaper on a bench. Normal life, so far removed from the world she'd stepped into. She waited exactly 15 minutes as Dominic had instructed. Then she pulled out her phone, pretended to read a text, sighed as if she'd been stood up, and left cash on the table along with the manila envelope positioned at the edge. She stood, put on her coat, and walked out without looking back. Her hands were shaking as she walked back toward the subway. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Whatever was in that envelope, evidence, blackmail, instructions for something she didn't want to imagine, was no longer her problem. She was just the delivery girl, invisible and unremarkable, exactly as Dominic had said. Elena was halfway down the subway steps when she heard the screaming. She turned, along with a dozen other people, to see smoke pouring from Il Gabbiano's windows. Then came the sound. Not an explosion exactly, but something shattering, followed by more screams. People began running from the restaurant, and in the chaos, Elena saw something that made her blood freeze. 2 men in dark suits were fighting in the doorway. One of them pulled a gun and Elena ducked behind a newspaper stand, her heart hammering. She couldn't see clearly through the crowd, but she heard 2 gunshots, sharp and unmistakable, followed by the sound of police sirens approaching. She ran then down into the subway station onto the first train that arrived, not caring where it was going. Her whole body was shaking, adrenaline making her vision sharp and her thoughts race. What had been in that envelope? What had she just delivered? It took 2 transfers in 40 minutes before Elena made it back to Manhattan, to the service entrance of the penthouse building. She used her keycard with trembling hands and took the service elevator up, praying she wouldn't run into any other staff members. She couldn't face questions right now, couldn't pretend everything was normal. But when the elevator doors opened on the penthouse level, Dominic was there, waiting. He looked at her face, which must have been white as snow, and his expression hardened. "Come with me," he said, and led her back to his study. Once inside, he poured her a glass of something amber from a crystal decanter and pressed it into her hands. "Drink." Elena drank and the whiskey burned all the way down, making her cough, but it steadied her, brought feeling back to her numb fingers. "What happened?" Dominic asked, his voice controlled but urgent. I don't know. An attack? At the restaurant? After I left. Men fighting, gunshots, police." The words tumbled out in a rush. "What was in that envelope? What did I deliver?" Dominic's jaw clenched, and for a moment she saw something dangerous flash in his eyes, not directed at her but at whatever had happened at Il Gabbiano. Information. About a territorial dispute. Someone knew you were coming. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in rapid Italian too fast for Elena to follow with her limited understanding of the language. When he finished, he looked at her again, really looked at her. "Did anyone see you? Follow you?" "I don't think so. I ran when the shooting started. I took 3 different trains." Elena set down the glass before she dropped it. "Mr. Russo, what have you gotten me into?" "Nothing," he said firmly. "This isn't about you. You did exactly what I asked and you did it well, but there are people in my world who watch everything I do looking for weaknesses." He moved closer, and Elena was too shaken to step back. "You kept your composure. You didn't panic, didn't call the police, didn't do anything stupid. That's good. That's very good. People could have died, Elena whispered. People did die. 2 of them, but not innocents, soldiers, people who made choices that led them to that moment. Dominic's hand came up and Elena flinched before she could stop herself. But he didn't strike her. Instead, his fingers brushed her cheek gently, and gestures so at odds with everything else about him that it froze her in place. You're safe, Elena. I won't let anything happen to you. Why would you care? The question came out before she could stop it. I'm just a maid. Something shifted in his expression. Something almost vulnerable, quickly hidden. You're not just a maid anymore. Not after today. His hand dropped away and he stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. Take tomorrow off. Rest. We'll speak again on Monday. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice, and moved toward the door. But she stopped with her hand on the handle and looked back at him. He was standing by the window now, silhouetted against the city lights, looking as isolated and unreachable as a man could be. Mr. Russo, thank you for the warning about keeping my composure, and for, she didn't know how to finish that sentence, for not getting her killed, for caring enough to wait for her return. Dominic, he said quietly, when we're alone, you can call me Dominic. The intimacy of it, the permission to use his first name, felt more dangerous than anything else that had happened that day. Elena nodded and slipped out, closing the door softly behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and let herself shake. She'd crossed a line today, stepped from one world into another, and there was no going back. She should quit, should pack her things and disappear back to Los Angeles, back to safety and obscurity. But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't. Not just because she needed the money, but because something had changed in that study. The way Dominic had looked at her, touched her face, told her to call him by his first name. It had awakened something in her she didn't want to examine too closely. Whatever this was, whatever she'd become in his eyes, it terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. And that, Elena knew, was the most dangerous thing of all. 3 weeks passed, and Elena's life transformed in ways she couldn't have predicted. She no longer worked regular cleaning rotations with the other maids. Instead, Mrs. Chen assigned her to what she called special duties, a euphemism that meant Elena was now Dominic's personal attendant. She brought him coffee in the mornings, delivered messages to his study, and was present during meetings where she served drinks and took mental notes she was never supposed to acknowledge having heard. The other staff members treated her differently now, some with envy, others with wariness, all with a new kind of respect that came from proximity to power. Maria no longer gossiped with her in the changing room. Thomas, the butler, spoke to her with careful formality. Even Mrs. Chen's stern demeanor had softened into something approaching approval. But it was Dominic's behavior that unsettled Elena most. He'd begun requesting her presence for reasons that had nothing to do with household duties. Late nights in his study where he'd pour himself whiskey, and lately, tea for her, and they'd talk about everything and nothing, about the books she was reading, about her childhood in Los Angeles, about the mother she missed desperately and called every Sunday without fail. He never talked about his business, never mentioned the violence that surrounded him like an invisible fog, but he'd tell her other things, about growing up in Brooklyn, about his mother who died when he was 16, about the weight of inheriting an empire he'd never asked for. In those moments, with the city lights glowing beyond the windows and exhaustion softening the hard edges of his face, Dominic Russo became almost human. Elena knew she was in dangerous territory. She felt it every time their hands brushed when she handed him documents, every time his dark eyes lingered on her face a moment too long, every time she caught herself thinking about him when she should have been sleeping, wondering what it would feel like if he touched her the way a man touches a woman he desires, rather than an employee he finds useful. It was a Tuesday evening when everything shifted again. Elena was in the study, organizing files that Dominic had left scattered across his desk. He'd gone to a meeting downtown, something involving the Castellano family she'd gathered from the tense phone conversations she'd overheard. She wasn't supposed to read the documents, but her eyes caught names and numbers, fragments of a world she was becoming dangerously familiar with. She was so focused on her task that she didn't hear the door open behind her. Well, what do we have here? Elena spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. A man stood in the doorway, tall, heavy-set, with slicked back hair and a smile that made her skin crawl. She recognized him from previous visits. Vincent Marconi, one of Dominic's associates. He'd always made her uncomfortable with the way his eyes followed her around the room, Mr. Marconi, Elena said, keeping her voice steady. Mr. Russo isn't here. He's at a meeting downtown. I know where Dominic is, Vincent said, stepping into the study and closing the door behind him. The click of the lock made Elena's pulse spike. I came to see you, sweetheart. Elena moved behind the desk, putting furniture between them. I'm working. If you need something, I can have Mrs. Chen. I don't want Mrs. Chen. Vincent's smile widened, predatory and cold. I want to understand what makes you so special. Dominic's been acting different since you arrived. Distracted, soft. That's dangerous in our line of work. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just the help? Vincent laughed. Please. The help doesn't get private audiences with the boss. The help doesn't make him smile like you do. I've worked with Dominic for 6 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Elena's throat had gone dry. You need to leave. Now. Or what? You'll tell Dominic? Vincent moved closer, circling the desk slowly. He might be soft on you, but he's still a businessman. And in business, weaknesses get exploited. You're a weakness, Elena. A pretty little distraction that could get him killed. Elena's hand closed around a letter opener on the desk. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. Stay back. Vincent's expression darkened. You threatening me? You have no idea who you're dealing with, little girl. I've killed men for less disrespect than... The door burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Dominic stood in the doorway, and the look on his face made Elena's blood run cold. She'd seen him angry before, but this was something different, something primordial and terrifying. Get away from her. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more frightening than if he'd shouted. Vincent stepped back immediately, hands raised. Dom, I was just... Get away from her. Dominic moved into the room with the controlled violence of a predator. Now, Vincent, before I forget, we're family. Family. Elena filed that information away even as Vincent backed toward the door, his bravado crumbling under Dominic's lethal stare. I didn't touch her, Vincent said quickly. I was just talking. You locked the door. Dominic's hand moved to his waistband and Elena saw the grip of a gun. You cornered her in my private study. You threatened her. Give me one reason I shouldn't end this right now. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't move, watching as two men faced off over her like she was property to be defended rather than a person caught in the crossfire of something she didn't understand. Finally, Vincent lowered his eyes, a gesture of submission. You're right. I was out of line. It won't happen again. No, Dominic agreed coldly. It won't. Because if you come near her again, if you speak to her, if you even look in her direction, I'll put a bullet in your skull, cousin or not. Are we clear? Crystal. Vincent edged toward the door, his face flushed with humiliation and anger. But Dom, you need to think about what you're doing. This girl, she's making you weak. The others are starting to notice. Then let them notice. Dominic's jaw was set, his eyes chips of obsidian. And let them know that anyone who touches what's mine dies screaming. Get out. Vincent left, the door closing behind him with a soft click that felt thunderous in the sudden silence. Elena finally released the breath she'd been holding, her hands shaking so badly that she had to set down the letter opener before she dropped it. Dominic, He was across the room in 3 strides, his hands on her shoulders, eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her dizzy. Did he touch you? Did he hurt you? No, I'm fine. He scared me, but I'm fine. Elena was shocked to feel tears burning in her eyes. She never cried, had trained herself not to show weakness, but the adrenaline was crashing through her system and she couldn't stop the trembling. Shh, you're safe now. Dominic pulled her against his chest, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. The gesture was so tender, so at odds with the violence he'd just threatened, that Elena's tears finally spilled over. I've got you. I won't let anyone hurt you. Elena let herself lean into him for just a moment, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. He smelled like expensive cologne and something uniquely him, and despite everything, despite the danger, the fear, the absolute insanity of her situation, she felt safe in his arms. What's mine? She whispered against his chest. You called me yours. Dominic went still. Then slowly he pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands coming up to frame her cheeks. His thumbs brushed away her tears with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Yes, he said simply. You're mine, Elena. I don't know when it happened or how, But somewhere between you falling asleep in my bed and you walking into a war zone for me without question, you became mine. And I protect what's mine. This is crazy, Elena breathed. You're my boss. You're dangerous. You live in a world where people threaten each other with guns over what? Territory? Money? Power, Dominic corrected. Everything in my world is about power. Who has it? Who wants it? Who's willing to kill for it? His dark eyes searched hers. You should run from me, Elena. You should pack your things and disappear back to Los Angeles where you'll be safe. But you won't, will you? Elena knew she should say yes. Should tell him this had gone too far, that she couldn't be part of his world, couldn't be the weakness that Vincent claimed would get him killed. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. No, I won't run. Something blazed in Dominic's eyes. Triumph, desire, possession, all mixed together into an expression that should have terrified her but instead sent heat pooling low in her belly. Then you need to understand what that means. In my world, Elena, there's no middle ground. You're either in or you're out. Mine or you're nothing. If you let this happen between us, you'll be marked. You'll be a target. Every enemy I have will see you as a way to hurt me. I understand, Elena said, though she wasn't sure she truly did. How could she understand a world so foreign to everything she'd known? Do you? Dominic's thumb traced her lower lip, and Elena's breath hitched. Do you understand that I'm falling for you? That every day I watch you move through my home with your quiet dignity and your pure heart, and I want to corrupt you, to claim you, to make you mine in every way possible? The words were raw, honest in a way she'd never heard from him before. Elena's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart that matched her own. I'm already corrupted, she whispered. I delivered your package. I kept your secrets. I learned to look the other way when dangerous men come through your door. And worst of all, she took a shaky breath, I started wanting you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now. Dominic's control shattered. He kissed her, hard, desperate, months of tension exploding between them in a single moment. Elena melted into him, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, gasping when his tongue swept into her mouth with a possessiveness that made her knees weak. He walked her backward until her hips hit the desk, then lifted her onto it, stepping between her legs and kissing her like she was air, and he was drowning. Elena had been kissed before, awkward teenage fumbling, a few dates in her early 20s, but nothing had prepared her for this, for Dominic Russo unleashed, all that controlled violence channeled into passion that consumed everything in its path. Mine, he growled against her lips, his hands sliding down to grip her hips. Say it, Elena. Say you're mine. Yours, she gasped, and the word felt like surrender and victory all at once. I'm yours, Dominic. He groaned and captured her mouth again, and Elena lost herself in sensation. The taste of him, the feel of his hands on her body, the way he touched her like she was precious and breakable despite the intensity of his desire. One of his hands slid up to cup her breast through her uniform, and Elena arched into the touch, a small sound escaping her throat that made Dominic pull back, breathing hard. Not here, he said roughly, his eyes dark with lust. Not on my desk like some quick fuck, you deserve better than that. Elena's cheeks flamed, but she couldn't look away from him. What do I deserve? Everything. Dominic pressed his forehead to hers, his breath ragged. But I can only give you my world, Elena. My darkness. My danger. The question is whether that's enough. Before Elena could answer, Dominic's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He cursed in Italian and pulled it out, his expression hardening as he read the message. I have to go. There's a situation with the Castellanos that can't wait. He helped Elena off the desk, steadying her when her legs proved unsteady. Then he cupped her face one more time, kissing her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Stay in the penthouse tonight, he ordered. Don't go anywhere alone. Vincent won't try anything with witnesses, but I don't trust him not to be stupid. He pulled a card from his wallet and pressed it into her hand. My private number. If anything feels wrong, if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you call me immediately. Understand? Elena nodded, clutching the card like a lifeline. Be careful. Something soft crossed his features. Almost a smile. Always am. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in the study with swollen lips and a racing heart. She touched her fingers to her mouth, still feeling the phantom pressure of his kiss. What had she done? She'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, chosen a path that led into darkness and danger and a man who'd just admitted he wanted to corrupt her. But as Elena straightened her uniform and tried to calm her racing pulse, she realized something that should have terrified her but instead felt inevitable. She'd already been corrupted. The moment she'd delivered that package to Brooklyn, maybe even before, the first time she'd looked into Dominic Russo's eyes and seen past the monster to the man underneath, there was no going back now, only forward, into whatever came next. 2 floors below in the parking garage, Dominic sat in the back of his armored SUV and tried to regain his composure. His driver, Marcus, wisely said nothing as Dominic pressed his fingers to his temples and breathed deeply. He'd lost control. Completely. Kissed Elena in his study where anyone could have walked in. Claimed her with words that bound them together more effectively than any contract. And the worst part? He didn't regret it. Vincent was right. Elena was making him weak. But not in the way his cousin thought. She wasn't a distraction that dulled his edge. She was clarity in a world of chaos. Light in his perpetual darkness. When he was with her, Dominic remembered what it felt like to be human, to want something beyond power and control. But Vincent was also right about the danger. Every enemy Dominic had, and there were many, would see Elena as a weapon to use against him. The Castellanos, the Russians, even his own organization members who thought he was going soft. They'd all come for her eventually, trying to prove that Dominic Russo could be hurt, could be controlled through something as simple as caring about another person. He pulled out his phone and made a call to his head of security. I need a detail on Elena Martinez. 24/7 protection, rotating shifts, invisible unless there's a threat. And I want background checks on every staff member in the penthouse. Everyone. If someone so much as jaywalked 10 years ago, I want to know about it. After he hung up, Dominic stared out the tinted window at the Manhattan streets sliding past. He'd built his empire on the principle that attachment was weakness, that caring about people made you vulnerable. His father had taught him that lesson young, had shown him what happened to people who loved the wrong person in their world. But Elena had slipped past his defenses anyway with her quiet strength and honest eyes. She'd become essential without him realizing it, and now the thought of anything happening to her made Dominic's blood run cold in a way that no business threat ever could. Marcus, Dominic said quietly, if something happened to me, if the Castellanos or anyone else took me out, there's a file in my office safe, instructions for Elena's protection and financial security. You're one of the executors. Marcus met his eyes in the rearview mirror, understanding immediately. It won't come to that, boss, but I'll make sure she's taken care of if it does. Dominic nodded and turned back to the window. Somewhere above him, in a penthouse fortress that suddenly felt less secure than it had that morning, Elena was probably still reeling from what had happened between them. He hoped she understood what she'd agreed to, hoped she was strong enough to survive in his world. Because Dominic Russo had finally found something worth protecting more than his empire, and he'd burn the whole city down before he let anyone take her from him. The SUV pulled up to a warehouse in Red Hook, where the meeting with the Castellanos waited. Dominic pushed thoughts of Elena aside and let the coldness settle back over him like armor. In his world, sentiment got you killed. But as he walked into the warehouse where dangerous men waited to negotiate over territory and blood, Dominic carried with him the memory of Elena's lips against his, and the whispered word that had changed everything. Yours. For better or worse, she was his now, and God help anyone who tried to come between them. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning, shattering the fragile peace Elena had found in the 3 days since Dominic had kissed her in his study. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand in her small room in the servants' quarters, heart already racing before she saw the name on the screen. Carmen. Her sister never called this late unless something was catastrophically wrong. Carmen. Elena's voice was thick with sleep and fear. What happened? Elena. Her sister's voice was strangled with terror. Mama. She's gone. They took her. The world stopped. Elena sat up so fast her vision blurred. What do you mean they took her? Who took her? Carmen, you're not making sense. Men came to the house 2 hours ago. They had guns, Elena. They knew your name, knew where you worked. They said, Carmen's voice broke into a sob. They said if you want to see Mama alive again, you need to tell your boss to back off from some deal with the Castellanos. They gave me a number to call. Elena, what's happening? Why would anyone take Mama because of your job? Elena couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, walls closing in. Her mother, her gentle, sick mother who'd never hurt anyone in her life, kidnapped because of her, because she'd been stupid enough to fall for a man whose world consumed everything it touched. Did you call the police? Elena forced the words out through numb lips. They said if we call the police, they'll kill her. They said they're watching the house. Elena, I'm so scared. What do we do? Elena's training. Years of keeping calm in crisis, of being the strong one when her father left and her mother got sick, kicked in despite her terror. Listen to me carefully. Pack a bag with essentials. Get out of the house and go to Aunt Rosa's. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I'll handle this. How? Elena, these men, I know people who can help. The words tasted like ash. Give me the number they gave you. And Carmen? I'm so sorry, this is my fault. Just bring her home, Carmen whispered. Please, just bring Mama home. After Carmen gave her the number and hung up, Elena sat in the darkness of her room, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She should have known, should have seen this coming the moment Vincent had cornered her, the moment Dominic had called her his. In his world, being claimed by the boss made you a target, and she'd been arrogant enough to think she could navigate that danger. Now her mother was paying the price. Elena looked at Dominic's private number in her phone. The card he'd given her was tucked in her wallet, but she'd saved it immediately. It was late, and he'd come back from his meeting with the Castellanos 3 nights ago looking exhausted and dangerous. Blood on his knuckles that he'd tried to hide from her. She'd barely seen him since. He'd been locked in his study or gone to meetings, and the tension in the penthouse had been suffocating. But her mother's life was worth more than worrying about disturbing his sleep. She called. He answered on the second ring, voice alert, despite the hour. Elena? What's wrong? Just hearing his voice made her throat tighten, tears she'd been holding back threatening to spill over. They took her. The Castellanos. They took my mother. They said if you don't back off from some deal, they'll kill her. Silence. Then, where are you? My room. In the servants' quarters. Stay there. Lock the door. I'm coming to you. The line went dead. Elena did as he said, locking her door and then pacing the tiny room like a caged animal. 5 minutes later, though it felt like hours, a knock came. It's me, Dominic's voice said quietly. Elena opened the door to find him in black pants and a t-shirt, hair disheveled, gun tucked into his waistband. He looked dangerous and deadly, and exactly like the man who could save her mother. He stepped inside, locked the door behind him and pulled Elena into his arms. Tell me everything, he said against her hair, every detail. Elena recounted Carmen's call, her voice breaking when she described the men with guns invading her childhood home. Dominic listened silently, one hand stroking her back, the other already typing on his phone with his thumb. When she finished, he pulled back to look at her face, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. This is my fault. I should have anticipated they'd go after your family. The Castellanos are old school. They use leverage, not direct confrontation. What deal? Elena asked. What do they want you to back off from? Territory in Brooklyn? Docks that control distribution routes? Dominic's jaw clenched. They've been pushing for months and I've been pushing back. 3 nights ago I told them no. Final answer. They obviously decided to get creative with their negotiation tactics. So give them what they want. Elena grabbed his arms, desperate. Please, Dominic, I don't care about territory or docks or any of it. Just give them what they want. And get my mother back. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or guilt. It's not that simple. If I back down now, I look weak. Every family on the East Coast will think they can push me around by grabbing someone I care about. It'll be open season on everyone connected to me. I don't care about your reputation. Elena's voice rose, fear turning to anger. That's my mother. She has lupus. She needs her medication. She's terrified of loud noises because my father used to. Her voice broke. Please, I'm begging you, save her. Dominic cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I will save her, but not by giving the Castellanos what they want. I'm going to take her back by force, and then I'm going to make them regret ever touching someone under my protection. How? Elena whispered. I have people in Los Angeles, associates who owe me favors. I'll have them locate your mother and extract her. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But Elena, this is going to get violent. Very violent. Men will die because of this, and some of the blood will be on my hands. Can you live with that? Elena thought of her mother, soft-spoken Rosa Martinez who'd worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table after their father left, who'd never missed one of Elena's school plays despite being exhausted, who still called her Mija and worried about her being so far away in New York. Could she live with violence if it brought her mother home safely? Yes, Elena said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Dominic nodded once, then pulled out his phone and made a call. Tony? It's me. I need a favor in Los Angeles. He stepped away slightly, talking in low, rapid Italian that Elena could only partially follow. She caught words like extraction, location, and maximum force authorized. When he hung up, he made 3 more calls, each one dispatching resources, calling in favors, mobilizing what sounded like a small army. Elena watched him work, seeing for the first time the full extent of his power. This wasn't just a businessman or even a crime boss. This was someone with reach that spanned the entire country, with people who jumped when he called no matter the hour. Finally, he turned back to her. My people will find her. They're pulling security footage from your neighborhood now, tracking the vehicles. We'll have a location within 6 hours. 6 hours? Elena's voice was small. That's so long. What if they hurt her? What if they won't? Dominic pulled her close again, and Elena let herself lean into his strength. Your mother is leverage. She's worthless to them dead. They'll keep her comfortable enough to use as a bargaining chip. You can't know that for sure. No, he admitted quietly. But I've been in this business long enough to understand how these things work. The Castellanos are brutal, but they're not stupid. Killing her before they get what they want would be pointless. Elena wanted to believe him, but fear had sunk its claws deep into her chest and wouldn't let go. This is my fault. I should have stayed away from you. Should have kept my distance like Maria warned me to. This is not your fault. Dominic's voice turned fierce. This is on me. I'm the one who dragged you into my world. I'm the one who made you a target by caring about you. And I'm the one who's going to fix it. By starting a war? If necessary. He pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes burning with an intensity that stole her breath. You need to understand something, Elena. In my world, when someone takes something of mine, I don't negotiate. I don't compromise. I take it back and I make sure everyone knows what happens when they cross that line. Your mother will come home safely, but the Castellanos will pay for this in blood. The certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Elena felt a fierce gratitude that this dangerous man was on her side. What do? I can't just sit here and wait. Actually, that's exactly what you'll do. Dominic's tone left no room for argument. You'll stay in the penthouse under guard until this is resolved. The Castellanos might try to grab you next, use you to pressure your mother into cooperating or to force my hand. I'm not giving them that opportunity. I need to be there when you get her back. I need to see that she's okay. And you will. As soon as it's safe, I'll bring her here. He hesitated, then added, Elena, when this is over, when your mother is safe, you need to make a decision. You can go back to Los Angeles with her, disappear from my life where you'll be safe. I'll set you up with money, protection, a fresh start. Or, Elena prompted when he fell silent. Or you stay, with me. But if you stay, your mother and sister will need protection for the rest of their lives. They'll need to relocate, take on new identities, live under guard. Your old life will be over, completely. His expression was pained. I won't lie to you. Staying with me means danger, always. For you and everyone you love. I can minimize it, but I can't eliminate it. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, at the exhaustion lining his face, the burden he carried in the set of his shoulders, the loneliness that clung to him despite his power. Dominic Russo had everything money could buy, and nothing that actually mattered. Until somehow, impossibly, she'd started to matter to him. I'll decide when my mother is safe, Elena said quietly. Not before. He nodded, accepting that. Fair enough. He glanced at his watch. It's almost 5. I need to make more calls, coordinate the extraction, try to get some rest. I can't sleep. Then come with me. He held out his hand. We'll wait together. Elena took his hand and let him lead her upstairs to his study. While Dominic worked, making calls, reviewing security footage that his people sent him, coordinating logistics with terrifying efficiency, Elena curled up on the leather couch and watched. She must have dozed off at some point because she woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Dominic shaking her shoulder gently. They found her, he said, and Elena's heart leaped. She's in a warehouse in East Los Angeles, guarded by 4 men. My team is moving in now. Elena sat up, suddenly wide awake. Can we listen, watch? Dominic hesitated, then nodded. He pulled up a laptop and opened a secure video feed. Elena gasped. She could see the warehouse interior through what must have been body cameras on Dominic's people. 4 men in tactical gear were approaching the building, weapons drawn, moving with lethal precision. This is going to be violent, Dominic warned. You might want to look away. But Elena couldn't look away. She watched as Dominic's team breached the warehouse as gunfire erupted. sharp cracks that made her flinch even through the laptop speakers. She watched men fall, watched the brutal efficiency of trained killers doing what they did best. And then, in a back room, she saw her mother. Rosa Martinez sat tied to a chair wearing her favorite purple cardigan, looking terrified, but unharmed. Elena's sob of relief was so loud it startled even Dominic. "Tony, package secured," a voice said through the speakers. "4 hostiles down. Package is unharmed. Requesting extraction." "Granted," Dominic said into his phone. "Bring her to the airstrip. I'll have a plane waiting." He closed the laptop and pulled Elena into his arms as she cried. Great, shuddering sobs of relief and residual terror. "She's safe," he murmured against her hair. "I told you I'd get her back." "Thank you," Elena gasped between sobs. "Thank you, thank you." "Shh. You don't need to thank me. This is what I do for people who are mine." He kissed her forehead, her temples, the tears streaming down her cheeks. "She'll be here by tonight. I'm flying her directly to New York on my private plane. Your sister, too. I sent people to pick her up from your aunt's house." Elena pulled back, wiping her eyes. "What about the Castellanos? Won't they retaliate?" Dominic's expression went cold, dangerous. "Let them try. I'm done playing nice with families who think they can threaten what's mine. The Castellanos will learn that lesson today, one way or another. What are you going to do?" "What I should have done weeks ago." He stood, straightening his shirt. "I'm going to end this war before it destroys everything I care about." Elena caught his hand. "Don't die," she whispered. "Please. I can't lose you too." Something soft flickered in his eyes. "I don't plan to. But Elena, if something happens to me, Marcus has instructions. You and your family will be taken care of, protected. You'll never want for anything. I don't want your money. I want you alive." Dominic smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "Then I'll do my best to survive. For you." He kissed her once, hard and desperate, then left. Elena watched him go. Fear and love tangled so tightly in her chest she couldn't breathe. She'd fallen for a dangerous man, and now both their worlds were burning. But her mother was safe, and for now that had to be enough. Elena stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Dominic's penthouse, watching the sun set over Manhattan in shades of amber and crimson. 6 months had passed since the night the Castellanos had taken her mother. 6 months that had transformed her life so completely that sometimes she barely recognized the woman she'd become. Behind her she could hear her mother's soft laughter drifting from the guest wing, where Rosa was video calling Carmen. Her sister had visited twice in the past months, still adjusting to the reality that their family now lived under the protection of one of the most powerful men on the East Coast. Rosa had taken longer to adjust. The trauma of her kidnapping had left scars that therapy was slowly helping to heal. But she was safe now. They all were. Safe, but living in a gilded cage guarded by men with guns. Elena's reflection in the window showed a woman she was still learning to know. She wore tailored clothes now instead of a maid's uniform. Dominic had insisted, though she'd fought him on it at first. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, professionally styled. She looked like she belonged in this world of luxury and danger, even if some part of her still felt like the girl from East Los Angeles playing dress-up. "You're thinking too hard again." Dominic's voice came from the doorway, warm with affection. Elena turned to find him leaning against the frame, jacket discarded, tie loosened, looking tired but content. He'd been in meetings all day, the legitimate kind, managing the legal businesses that served as fronts for his empire. The past 6 months had seen him shift more operations into legitimate territory, a change Elena liked to think she'd influenced, though Dominic claimed it was purely strategic. "Just remembering," Elena said softly. "6 months ago today, you saved my mother's life." Dominic crossed the room to her, sliding his arms around her waist from behind and pulling her back against his chest. 6 months ago today, I realized I'd met the woman who would change everything about my life." Elena leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "Did I change things? Really? You're still the same man, running the same empire. Am I?" Dominic pressed a kiss to her temple. "The same man who thought attachment was weakness, who believed love was just another weapon people would use against him. That man wouldn't have this." He gestured to the penthouse, to where Rosa's laughter still echoed. A woman's mother living in his home. Her sister visiting with her new boyfriend. Sunday dinners where we pretend to be a normal family. "We're not normal," Elena said, but she was smiling. "No," Dominic agreed, "but we're ours, and that's better than normal." Elena turned in his arms to face him. Even after 6 months, the sight of him still made her breath catch. The sharp angles of his face, the darkness in his eyes that now softened when he looked at her, the controlled power in every movement. She'd learned to read him in ways no one else could, learned the difference between the cold boss who commanded an empire and the man who held her at night and murmured vulnerabilities he'd never admit to in daylight. "Tell me about today," she said, reaching up to loosen his tie completely. It had become their ritual, him coming home tense from the weight of his world, her helping him shed the armor piece by piece until the man underneath emerged. "The meeting with the Russians went well," Dominic said, his hands settling on her hips. "They're willing to consolidate territories, share certain routes. It's not what I wanted, but it's stable. No bloodshed. That's good." Elena slid the tie free and started unbuttoning his shirt. "And the Castellanos?" Dominic's expression hardened slightly. "Still quiet. After what happened, they don't have the resources or the reputation to challenge me. Vincent's been making noise about them showing weakness, but—" "Vincent is always making noise about something," Elena interrupted. She'd learned not to let Dominic's volatile cousin rent space in their peace. After the kidnapping, Dominic had made it clear to his entire organization that Elena and her family were untouchable. Vincent had sulked but ultimately bent the knee, recognizing that his cousin had drawn a line he wouldn't cross. "True." Dominic caught her hands, stilling them. "Enough about business, I have something for you." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Another something?" "Dominic, you have to stop buying me things. I'm running out of places to put jewelry." "It's not jewelry." He pulled a manila folder from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. "Open it." Elena's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were official-looking documents. Deeds, contracts, legal paperwork, dense with language she didn't fully understand. But she understood enough to make her breath catch. "This is the house in Los Angeles," she whispered. "My mother's house. You bought it? Paid off the mortgage and put it in your mother's name," Dominic confirmed. "And before you argue, this isn't about control or obligation. It's about making sure that if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." Elena set down the folder and grabbed his shirt. "Don't talk like that." "Elena." His hands covered hers, gentle but firm. "In my world, I have to plan for contingencies. If something happens, your family needs to be protected. The house is paid for. There's a trust fund for your mother's medical expenses and your sister's education. You'll have access to accounts that will keep all of you comfortable for life." "I don't want your money," Elena said fiercely. "I want you alive and here with me. You have me." Dominic pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "But you also have security. I need to know that you're taken care of, that I've done everything I can to protect the people I love." The word hung between them. Love. They'd danced around it for months, shown it in actions rather than words, but hearing him say it so plainly made Elena's heart stutter. "You love me," she whispered. "Yes." No hesitation, no qualifications. "I love you, Elena Martinez. Probably have since you fell asleep in my bed and looked at me with those terrified eyes but refused to beg for mercy. Definitely since you walked into a war zone for me without question. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that you're crazy enough to stay." Elena's eyes burned with tears. "I love you too, even though you're dangerous and impossible and you've turned my entire life upside down. I love you, Dominic Russo." He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. Elena melted into him, her hands sliding up into his hair, his arms banding around her like he could protect her from the whole world through sheer will alone. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers again. "Move into my room," he said quietly. "Officially. Stop pretending you sleep in the guest wing when we both know you spend every night in my bed anyway." Elena laughed, the sound watery with emotion. "What will the staff say? That their boss has finally found something more important than his empire?" Dominic traced her jaw with his thumb. "Besides, they already know. Mrs. Chen asked me last week if she should reassign your old room to the new hire. She did not. She absolutely did, with that look of hers that says she knows everything and tolerates our attempts at discretion out of politeness." He smiled. "So what do you say? Make it official?" "Yes," Elena breathed. "Yes, I'll move in with you. I'll share your bed and your life and whatever darkness comes with it." "Not just darkness," Dominic promised. "I'm trying to build something better. For you. For us." He pulled back slightly, his expression turning serious. "Elena, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I've been working on." A flutter of nervousness moved through her chest. "What?" I'm retiring. From the family business. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Not immediately, Dominic clarified. It'll take time, a year, maybe two. But I'm transitioning power to my underboss, consolidating legitimate operations, distancing myself from anything that could come back on you or your family. I want out, Elena. I want a life that doesn't require looking over my shoulder constantly, wondering which enemy is going to strike next. Because of me, Elena said, understanding dawning. Because of us. Dominic cupped her face. Because I finally have something worth more than power or control or fear. I have you, and I have the possibility of a future that doesn't end in prison or a pine box. I'm not stupid enough to throw that away for an empire built on sand. Elena's mind was reeling. Your organization, they'll never let you just walk away. They will if I do it right. If I set up a proper succession, ensure everyone's interests are protected, make myself more valuable as a retired ally than as an active boss. His jaw set in that determined way she'd come to know. It won't be easy. There will be challenges, probably violence. But I've been planning this for months, putting pieces in place. You showed me that there's life beyond this world, Elena. I want that life. With you. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks, and she didn't try to stop them. You'd give up everything for me? No, Dominic said softly. I'd give up everything that doesn't matter for the one thing that does. There's a difference. Elena kissed him again, pouring 6 months of love and fear and desperate hope into it. When they finally broke apart, she was laughing and crying at the same time. My mother is going to lose her mind when I tell her, Elena said. She already thinks you're some kind of fairy tale prince who rescued us. I'm no prince. Dominic's smile was wry. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you deserve. 2 months later, Elena sat in Dominic's study, their study now, reviewing applications for a position she'd created, Community Outreach Coordinator for the Russo Foundation. It was Dominic's idea, establishing a legitimate charitable foundation that actually did good in communities like the one Elena had grown up in. Scholarships for kids, medical assistance for families, job training programs. It was small, but it was real, and it was helping people. It was also excellent cover for Dominic's transition out of illegal operations, but Elena tried not to think about that too much. Miss Martinez? Elena looked up to find Thomas, the butler, standing in the doorway. He still called her Miss Martinez, despite the fact that she and Dominic were living together openly now. Some formalities were too ingrained to break. Mrs. Chen wanted me to inform you that your sister has arrived. She's in the sitting room with your mother. Thank you, Thomas. Elena set aside the applications and headed for the sitting room, where she found Carmen curled up on the sofa next to Rosa, both of them looking at something on Carmen's phone. Elena! Carmen jumped up and hugged her tightly. Look at this. Marco proposed. I'm engaged. Elena looked at the ring on her sister's finger, simple but beautiful, and felt her heart swell. Carmen, that's wonderful. When did this happen? Last night. He took me to that Italian restaurant where we had our first date and just... Carmen's face glowed with happiness. He got down on one knee and everything. I can't believe it. I'm getting married. Rosa was crying happy tears, reaching for Elena's hand. Both my girls, so happy. If your father could see you now, he'd be drunk and asking for money, Elena said dryly, then immediately felt guilty. But Rosa laughed and Carmen did too, because it was true and they all knew it. You're right, Rosa admitted. But he'd also be proud, in his way. My Elena, living in this beautiful place with a good man who loves her. And Carmen, marrying a teacher who worships the ground she walks on. I'm so blessed. We're all blessed, Elena said, settling beside them. Though, Mama, you do know Dominic isn't exactly... I know what he is, Rosa interrupted gently. I'm not naive, mija. I know the world he comes from, the things he's done. But I also know he saved my life. I know he's protecting all of us, and I see the way he looks at you, like you're the sun and moon and stars all together. She squeezed Elena's hand. Love isn't always simple or clean. Sometimes it's messy and complicated and comes from the most unexpected places. But it's still love. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I do love him, Mama. So much it terrifies me sometimes. Good, Rosa said firmly. Love should be a little terrifying. It means you're brave enough to risk everything for something that matters. The door opened, and Dominic walked in, still in his suit from whatever meeting he'd been in. His eyes found Elena immediately. softening in that way they only did for her, and she felt her heart do that familiar flip. "Sorry to interrupt," Dominic said. "Carmen, congratulations on your engagement. Marco's a good man." Carmen blinked. "How did you know?" "I know everything," Dominic said with a slight smile. Then, more seriously, "Actually, Marco called to ask my permission. Said he knew I was important to your family and he wanted to do things properly." "You gave permission for my sister to marry?" Elena asked, torn between amusement and exasperation. "I told him if he ever hurt her I'd break both his kneecaps," Dominic said pleasantly. "But yes, I gave my blessing." Carmen laughed. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "So I've been told." Dominic crossed to Elena and held out his hand. "Can I steal you for a moment?" Elena took his hand and let him lead her out to the balcony, where the city sparkled below them in the growing darkness. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and they stood together in comfortable silence. "Your family is happy," Dominic observed. "That's good. They are. Thanks to you." Elena leaned back against him. "How was your meeting?" "Productive. Vincent is taking over operations in Brooklyn next month. The transition is happening faster than I expected." He paused. "I met with my lawyer today too. Had some papers drawn up." Elena turned to face him. "What kind of papers?" Dominic pulled a small box from his pocket, and Elena's breath stopped. "The kind that require an answer before they're valid." He opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and understated. "Marry me, Elena. Not because you're obligated, not because I've given you things or protected your family. Marry me because you love me and I love you, and we've built something together that neither of us wants to lose." Elena's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling over. "Dominic, I know I'm not what you imagined when you thought about your future," he continued. "I know I come with baggage and danger and a past that will always be part of who I am. But I swear to you, Elena, I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. I'll build us a life beyond this world. I'll keep you safe. I'll love you with everything I have." "Yes," Elena breathed. "Yes, of course, yes." Dominic's smile was brilliant as he slid the ring onto her finger. Then he pulled her into a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promise. When they broke apart, Elena was laughing and crying at the same time. "I'm going to be Mrs. Russo," she said wonderingly. "You're going to be my wife," Dominic corrected. "My partner, the woman who saved me from myself." He rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you, Elena, for seeing past the monster to the man underneath, for loving me despite everything, for giving me a reason to want to be better. You were always more than what you let people see," Elena said softly. "I just helped you remember that." They stood together on the balcony, the city alive around them, holding each other as the last light faded from the sky. Behind them, through the windows, Elena could hear her mother and sister exclaiming over her ring. Carmen must have seen it somehow. Their joy filtered out to the balcony, mixing with the sounds of the city, creating a symphony of normalcy that Elena had never thought she'd have. 6 months ago, she'd been a maid sleeping in the wrong bed, terrified of a man whose world was built on violence and control. Now she was that man's fiancée, living in a penthouse that had become home, surrounded by family she'd thought she might lose forever. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, it was better, messier, more complicated, more dangerous, but also more real and full of more love than she'd ever dreamed possible. "What are you thinking?" Dominic murmured against her hair. Elena smiled. "That you found me sleeping in your bed, and it changed everything." "No," Dominic corrected softly. "You changed everything. The bed was just the excuse I needed to let you into my life." Inside the penthouse, laughter rang out, Rosa and Carmen celebrating, their joy uncomplicated and pure. Out here, Elena stood in the arms of a dangerous man who'd chosen her over his empire, who'd shown her that love could exist even in darkness, who'd proven that people could change if they had someone worth changing for. The Mafia boss had found his maid sleeping in his bed, and what happened next had changed not just everything but everyone, transforming them all into something neither had been before, but both had always needed to become, together. 3 years later. Epilogue. The house in Connecticut was nothing like the Manhattan penthouse. It was smaller, warmer, filled with photographs and comfortable furniture that showed signs of being actually lived in. Elena moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, preparing Sunday dinner while Dominic set the table and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, helped by trying to steal silverware. "Sophia Rosa Russo, put the fork down," Dominic said sternly, but his eyes were soft as he scooped up his daughter and blew a raspberry against her neck. Her giggles filled the kitchen. Elena watched them, her heart full. Dominic had kept his promise. He'd left the organization, handed power to Vincent, who'd surprisingly risen to the occasion, and built them a life beyond the darkness. He consulted on legitimate business ventures now, used his connections for legal purposes, and dedicated most of his time to the Russo Foundation that had grown beyond anything Elena had imagined. They split time between the Connecticut house and the Manhattan penthouse, which Dominic had kept for business purposes but no longer felt like a fortress. Rosa lived in the guest house on their Connecticut property, close enough to help with Sophia, but far enough for privacy. Carmen and Marco lived nearby with their infant son. It was normal. It was peaceful. It was everything Elena had never dared to dream. "Your mother called," Dominic said, setting Sophia in her high chair. "She wants to know if we're coming to Marco's birthday party next weekend." "Of course we are. Carmen would kill me if we missed it." Elena brought the roast to the table, accepting Dominic's kiss on her cheek as she passed. Though Sophia might not survive the trip, she's discovered the word no and uses it approximately 800 times a day. "She gets that from you," Dominic said with a grin. "She gets it from you," Elena countered. "Stubborn, determined, won't take no for an answer. Keeps the people she loves safe," Dominic finished. "Fights for what matters. Isn't afraid to burn the world down for family." Elena softened, reaching across to take his hand. "Yes, all of that too." They ate dinner as a family, Sophia making a mess and Dominic patiently cleaning it up, while Elena told him about the new scholarship program she was designing. After dinner, they gave Sophia a bath together, read her 3 stories, she insisted on 3, and like her father, what Sophia wanted Sophia usually got, and put her to bed. Later, wrapped in Dominic's arms in their bedroom, Elena traced the scar on his jaw, the one she'd noticed that first morning after falling asleep in his bed. "Do you miss it?" she asked quietly. "The power, the control, the empire?" Dominic was silent for a moment, considering. "Sometimes," he admitted, "there was a rush to it, a certainty. I always knew my purpose, my role." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes warm in the lamplight. "But then I come home to you and Sophia, and I realize I never actually lived until I walked away. Power is an addiction, Elena. Love is life. I chose life. No regrets? Not a single one." He kissed her softly. "You were sleeping in my bed, and when I found you there I had a choice. Stay in my darkness or reach for your light. Best decision I ever made." Elena smiled against his lips. "The Mafia boss and his maid. It sounds like a story someone made up." "It's our story," Dominic corrected. "And it's still being written." He was right. Their story was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, shadows from his past that occasionally surfaced, the constant vigilance that came from being married to a man who'd once commanded an empire. But there would also be love, family, the daughter sleeping down the hall, and perhaps more children in the future. The Mafia boss had found his maid sleeping in his bed, and what happened next had changed everything. They'd built a life from ashes and darkness, created light where there had been only shadow, chosen each other over and over again despite every obstacle. And as Elena drifted off to sleep in Dominic's arms, safe and loved and home, she knew that some fairy tales did come true. They were just messier, more complicated, and more beautiful than anyone ever wrote about.